Hi, everybody. Tonight we have Tom Whitmore back with us of MUFON, that is the Mutual UFO Reporting Network. And Tom is a longtime member of MUFON, a board member, and an avid research into all things UFO. Now, Tom, what caught my attention recently is the fact that U.S. Senator Kirsten Gillibrand of New York has introduced a bill in the Senate, which I guess would create a UFO studies office as an amendment to the Defense Authorization Bill. What is your understanding of that, and what impact it would have on researchers and organizations such as yours?
Well, if this passes, if it becomes law, this is huge. This is absolutely the biggest thing that has happened to UFO investigations in probably 50 years. The House passed its version of the National Defense Authorization Act, HR 4350, in September. And the Senate Armed Services Committee reported its own NDAA in September as well. So the substitute amendment is being filed along with that bill for the National Defense Authorization Act. Now, first of all, I want to say that I want to give credit to a fellow researcher by the name of Doug Johnson. And a couple of these notes that I'm going to read here are notes that he posted on Twitter today. And he also, Doug has been reading the Congressional Record every day. So he's been keeping the UFO community updated on Twitter. And it's really because of Doug that I was able to go right to the amendment, and read it word for word. I also copied it and pasted it into my own word processor so that I could make notes about the sections of the amendment. But it does have to pass through the process. The Senate passes its version of the bill, the House passes its version, and then those two versions have to be reconciled.
Where does it stand right now? It's in the Senate, but the House already has a version. What is that?
Yeah, it's in the Senate, and I believe they're going to vote on it later maybe tomorrow.
Yeah.
So then if there are many differences between the two, then those will have to be reconciled.
All right. Well, we're recording this on November 16th, 2021. So and today's Tuesday. So they may be passing as soon as tomorrow, which would be Wednesday.
Yes.
October 17th, 2021. All right. Now, I'm curious about what made Senator Gillibrand offer something like this. I mean, is she a UFO aficionado, or what's going on with her?
I don't know. Her name just came up out of the blue. I'd like to know the answer to that question myself. And I think a lot of us in the UFO community would like to know. And I'm sure we'll find out more later. But it's bipartisan in that she's a Democrat.
Right.
You have Marco Rubio, who's a Republican, and another gentleman by the name of Mr. Heinrich, and he's a Democrat. So you have a bipartisan effort here.
Does New York have more than its fair share of UFO sightings? I think she's from upstate New York.
Yeah, I mean, they do. They have their share for sure. And there's a prominent person in the UFO community that has been a journalist up there and has tracked a lot of the sightings up there. And there were the famous Hudson Valley sightings in the 80s of these triangular, or actually boomerang-shaped craft, and some interaction with nuclear power stations. So yeah, New York has a history of UFO sightings and activity. I don't know if that has anything to do with Senator Gillibrand's being interested in it. No. It's apparent to me that some very substantive work has been done by Christopher Mellon and Luis Elizondo on both sides of Congress, and they are really making headway. This is really a substantial increase in the scope of the government's purported involvement in the UFO issue.
You think they're really getting serious about this? I mean, for years and years and years, it was debunked all around. It was a object of ridicule. Although I've noticed lately, even some of the stations and broadcast stations are taking it more seriously. There's no longer as many snickers as there was before. So, is this the beginning, at least, of a turning point where they're actually taking this seriously? High officials are taking this as seriously and admitting that there is something out there?
I hope so, but there has been a history, a track record of it being of the subject being avoided for whatever reasons. And I think historically there have been two factions in the Department of Defense and in the upper reaches of the government. One faction in favor of releasing more information and the other faction against it. And it's apparent to me from the events that we have seen since the publishing of the New York Times article in December of 2017, and then the passage of the request by the Senate committee, leading up to the unidentified aerial phenomena task force report through the Director of National Intelligence, and now this. So it's apparent to me that those in favor of greater disclosure and involvement with the UFO topic are winning.
Well, it's been noted by, I guess, Rubio and other officials, other members of the of Congress, that they're more worried about this technology belonging to a foreign government rather than if it's by aliens. In other words, they're less alarmed by the prospect that aliens are controlling it than they are by a foreign rival nation. Is that your reading on it too?
Well, not exactly. There have been notions for many years, that the quote unquote aliens are running this whole thing. But lately I've been thinking that with all of this talk about threat, that the threat that they're worried about is that Russia or China could get a leg up on us. That's the real threat. A lot of the people in the DoD don't even care about UFOs and aliens. So, now I just had a conversation with a former CIA officer yesterday, and he said, well, we know everything the Russians are doing. They know everything that we're doing. But what if you have a craft that can cloak itself from radar and from instrumentation and do some of the things that we know that these UFOs have been doing? I think that's their chief worry right now.
So in other words, the common belief is that if they are out there and there's more evidence they're admitting to that they are out there, whatever it is, the common denominator here is a belief that it's not from any earthly government, but the concern is that some other nation, especially a rival nation, a dangerous nation to the U.S., will get a hold of that technology first and use it for themselves, rather than a belief that it's that a foreign nation is actually producing this. The worry is that they'll get it first from alien technology.
Yeah, maybe so. But there have been rumors for many years that our government has outsourced it to private industry, and their private industry, namely the Lockheed types, the Lockheeds and the Boeings of the world, have been working on this for many years. And assuming that it is an advanced alien technology, that's a tough nut to crack. I mean, who knows how many years ahead they are of us? If they're 100, 10,000, 50,000, a million years ahead of us, it's very difficult to reproduce that.
Well, Tom, isn't it a fact that, or at least a conclusion now, that if the maneuvers described by these UFOs are accurate, that it has to be a propulsion system that's something of a physics that either haven't been publicly disclosed or that even our advanced physicists just don't know about yet. I mean, it would have to be an entirely different type of propulsion rather than rocketry, would it not?
Yes, absolutely. Because we've seen what rocketry and jet engines can accomplish. In fact, I just got off of an airliner yesterday. I know what that's like. And, you know, it's those capabilities are finite. They're very finite. The director of NASA right now is talking about you know, the project to go back to the moon. Well, you can get to the moon in 3 or 4 days, but Mars, it takes months and months to get to Mars by our conventional technology. So a lot of people are assuming that these groups are from outer space, you know, they're extraterrestrial. They may not be, they may be based here and have been here for so long that we can't really identify an extraterrestrial source. But the fact of the matter is their capabilities, the flight capabilities of the craft are far beyond anything that we have.
Yeah,
and they can go in and out of orbit. They can fly through the sky. They can go into the sea and come out of the sea. They can travel under the sea at a pretty fast rate. So that's all very important.
In fact, wasn't there a recent incident involving the USS Connecticut nuclear sub that was hit by some object in the South China Sea? And perhaps it was the Chinese, perhaps it wasn't. What do you know about that?
I know that the commander of the sub got fired. Okay. And we don't know, and we may not know for some time what that sub actually hit. I think the Navy has to go through its process of beating up everybody and then conducting an investigation and then covering up like they sometimes do. But maybe at some point there will be a report and we'll find out what they actually hit.
Isn't the South China Sea area a hotspot for UFO sightings, especially those that emerge from the water and then submerge into the water?
I don't know if the South China Sea is. There are 2 areas that seem to be getting a lot of attention right now. That's off the coast of Southern California, off San Diego and the Catalina Island area. That's been a hot spot. And there's talk about a hot spot off the East Coast, off Florida and around there.
And the sites there involve UFOs that emerge from the water and dive into the water.
Yes. Yeah. There's been some speculation and rumor about the Mariana Trench. You know, that's absolutely out in the Pacific.
Yeah.
I haven't heard of a lot of UFO activity in South China Sea. That doesn't mean there isn't any, but I haven't heard about it.
You know, getting back to the physics that would be involved here, the propulsion system. Now, some of the maneuvers, they say going thousands of miles an hour, come to a complete dead stop on a dime, then go off in a different direction. Now, unless you overcome gravity and inertia somehow, any beings inside that object would be crushed by the sudden deceleration. So if these maneuvers are accurate, then it has to be a whole different type of physics.
Absolutely. And we've known about that forever. We've known about that since the early 50s with all of the UFO reports that were being filed, both in the Air Force projects and amongst the public, that these craft have exhibited these characteristics. So that's really nothing new, but it's hard to comprehend why the government publicly is waiting until now to actually treat this seriously on a public level, which is what they're going to be doing. It's possible that covertly they've been studying this all along, you know, and maybe they know more than we know. Maybe they know something we don't know.
Well, you know, I've asked you this before in our previous discussions. You know, why suddenly are they taking it seriously in a public way and you know, presenting it to the public and encouraging more of the public interest in this, when for all these years the official policy has been to deny. I mean, why this changeover? And if that's what it is, what's that about? What's motivating that?
There's been rumor and speculation, as always. Some people would like to think that somehow some people know that something is coming and we have to be prepared for it. Personally, my theory is a little more mundane. It's, Larry, what I mentioned earlier in this broadcast, that There are two factions, a pro-faction and an anti-faction. And I think the pro-faction is prevailing at this point.
So in other words, they're the ones that got it out publicly. They got the cat out of the bag. Now it can't be put back into the bag, at least not fully.
Oh, I think it can always be put back in the bag.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Now the trend right now is very positive. It's very encouraging for those of us who follow the UFO topic and hope for the best in terms of greater disclosure and acceptance of the UFO reality. But this is also involved in politics. We have politicians taking the initiative to try to get more information. Now, in theory, the members of Congress have every right to get a basic idea, if not a detailed idea, of what's going on. They have the responsibility of oversight. That's in the Constitution. But they don't always get information that they ask for. They get stonewalled by government agencies at times, and then maybe shenanigans and intrigues occur behind the scenes, and the Congress people aren't necessarily able to get the information they want. And also, you have Congress people that are positioning themselves and posturing and grandstanding, and this makes, I think, sometimes on the executive side, it makes these executive agencies skeptical of revealing too much to Congress.
But getting back to Kirsten Gillibrand's bill, so you expect that to get passed and have some traction?
I don't expect it to, but the first iteration of this that was created by Senator Rubio's group in the Senate, that did go through. And the delay in getting the total bill passed was for a different reason. It had nothing to do with Rubio's group's request. Now, I will say this is substantially, materially more detailed. The scope of this is much more extensive than Rubio's original request.
What was Rubio's original request?
Basically, that they form a UAP task force to collect information and provide a report through the Director of National Intelligence, which they did, and that was submitted on June 26th of this year. And it was a whopping 9 pages for the public side of it. Now, at the same time, as a result of that report, some of the Congress people and maybe some of the people in the upper reaches, the upper stratosphere of the government, they received the classified briefing. Okay. And we, the public, don't know what was in that, but I will say this, that the director of NASA now said that it made his hair stand on end, or the hair on the back of his neck stand up. So there's more to this. And maybe because of what some of the Congress people learned and some of the executive people learned from the classified side of this report, it's provided a greater impetus to increase the scope of responsibilities in this UFO investigation.
That is a direct quote and an accurate quote?
Yes, he said that at the event that occurred at the National Cathedral a few days ago.
Yeah.
Our Future in Space.
Yeah. Well, what do you think might have made his hair stand up?
Well, maybe they saw a really good video, not some little grainy thing that we get, in the public, yeah. Some little thing that's 5 seconds of some grainy image. Maybe he saw a really good video of what these Tic Tacs were doing. Maybe he saw detailed, now I'm speculating at this point, but maybe he saw detailed testimony from these pilots that interacted with these Tic Tacs. And maybe he heard about the sheer volume of these instances that the Navy has been encountering both on the West and the East Coast.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I got some quotes from Bill Nelson, who is the NASA director, administrator right now. Quote, I've talked to those pilots and they saw something and the radar is locked onto it and they didn't know what it is. And we don't know what it is. We hope it's not an adversary here on Earth that has that kind of technology. He was referring to, of course, the Navy pilot sightings of Colonel Fravor and others concerning those so-called tic-tac encounters. So that seems mild in terms of making your hair stand up. So there's probably more to it than that. You know, for all these years, Tom, the wisdom about this, about not disclosing, was that the public would panic. You know, nobody would be able to process it properly within their worldview. Religions would be threatened and might fall apart. There'd be chaos. There'd be paranoia. People would be looking at their neighbors. Is he an alien? Is she an alien? And that was supposedly one of the things that kept it from being disclosed. And the other thing was that they didn't want to give a heads up to foreign adversaries. So do you think any of those applied then and still apply now, those concerns?
Well, those concerns, that litany of concerns, is only applicable if you have really serious information to disclose. And that serious information would be the recovery of one or more craft, and the recovery of bodies, of beings, maybe even the relationship with one or more living beings, maybe even communication with this group or more groups. That's all really, really serious stuff. I mean, in the 50s and the 60s, many people in the public knew that UFOs were real. They read about them in the papers, they see it on TV, they know that people are seeing UFOs. The Air Force publicly was investigating UFOs during that time. Now they debunked most all of the sightings. There were some they couldn't debunk. So the idea of UFOs maybe being real is not new. That's not something that is really related to the panic. The panic is if we get absolute, solid, undeniable, unambiguous proof that we're being visited by one or more groups of unknown origin or of extraterrestrial origin, that is serious. Okay. And that could, I think it could cause a panic, even though I'm very much in favor of full disclosure at this point.
Well, everything you mentioned as the elements that would cause a panic, has any of that occurred? Is any of that definitely registering now as fact, or is it still speculation and scattered reports?
It's not just speculation. There have been beliefs. There have been notions for many years among some UFO researchers that, because of the Roswell event and other possible events, that the government had recovered craft and bodies, may even had a relationship. That's been kind of sort of underground. It's never really been out in the public that much. But now you have even Luis Elizondo saying and hinting that this has occurred, and he hasn't come right out and said it, but he has, when asked directly, he hasn't denied it either. So maybe some of this is starting to bubble up into the public.
A quick review of who Luis Elizondo is.
Luis Elizondo is a former Army and intelligence related person who had, I believe he was active in these wars that we've had in Iraq and Afghanistan. I believe he's been related to the interrogation and investigation of terrorist suspects that have been captured over there. I think right now, and then around the time of about 2010 or so, I think he got involved in this so-called ATIP program, which was an extension of the original OSAP program, which was perpetuated by Bigelow Aerospace.
What were they involved in?
Well, they were going back to 2008. Harry Reid arranged for there to be funding for Bigelow Aerospace, BASS, to conduct a UFO and paranormal study. And the Defense Intelligence Agency contracted with Bigelow Aerospace to do this work, and they provided a number of reports over a period of time, and that program ended in 2010. Now, Lou Elizondo became involved in that program sometime around then, or maybe a little later, and he was conducting a lot of investigations of these UFO encounters that the military has been having, that we've all heard about with the Tic Tacs on the West Coast and East Coast. And I believe Mr. Elizondo became very disillusioned with the Department of Defense, because there are people in the Department of Defense that do not want to deal with this. And I think Elizondo became frustrated that he couldn't make any more headway with the subject. And I think he somehow teamed up with Christopher Mellon, who had served in the Department of Defense and had served as a congressional aide and understood the levers of power over there. So I think those two got together and they started working, both the Defense Department and the Congress. And this is why I think we're seeing so much progress right now.
I think a lot of people would question, how come Elizondo and the other guy, Mellon, how come they're still around? How come they're being allowed to speak?
Well, they may have supporters, backers in the Pentagon. They apparently have some in Congress, that are listening to them. If you listen carefully to Elizondo's interviews, and he's given many over the last year, he's very careful not to disclose any classified information. He knows he could get in trouble for that. But at the same time, and I keep mentioning these factions, but perhaps there are a group of fairly high-level people in the Pentagon and maybe in the administration that are basically giving him a green light to go at this. And I think they're making tremendous progress.
Well, with the Gillibrand bill, if it is passed, is enacted, you say that this is, so many levels above of where it's all been before. More specifically, what would this do, and would MUFON have any part in it?
The reason why I'm laughing, excuse me, is in this amendment, they actually mentioned two specific organizations, one being the Galileo Project that's being run by Avi Loeb, the Harvard astronomer. And they also mentioned the SCU group, which is the Scientific Coalition for the Study of Unidentified Aerial Phenomena. But what it's going to do is the Secretary of Defense and the Director of National Intelligence are being directed to establish what they call an anomaly surveillance and resolution office. Okay, and that office will be collecting information. They will have, at least in theory, the authority to collect information from all the government agencies that could have information about UFOs that are occurring. Now, if I understand it correctly, I think that they're authorized to get information that has occurred since June 26th of this year, okay? And they're supposed to report semi-annually and annually to the Congress, and I believe the chronological scope of this occurs through 2026. So they're going to have about 4 years to do this, and they are going to have the ability, assuming they get adequate funding. Now, with all of the things that are listed in this amendment that the Congress is asking to be done, this is going to require a lot of staffing and a lot of money. So we'll see how that turns out.
And will the public have access to their findings?
They're supposed to provide the Secretary of Defense and or the Director of National Intelligence are supposed to provide annual reports which are specifically mentioned as both on unclassified and classified levels. So it's anybody's guess how much the public is going to get to see and how much is going to be classified and disclosed in closed door briefings in Congress. But now we have a greater probability of getting some useful information in the public. And that in itself is exciting.
Well, let's hope for the best. I know you made this your life's work, and you say that this would be a giant step forward. How soon do you expect all this to really get rolling?
They, if assuming it gets passed, they're directed to. Let me read you chapter and verse here. It says, not later than 180 days after the date of the enactment of this act, the Secretary of Defense shall, in coordination with the Director of National Intelligence, establish an office within an appropriate component of the Department of Defense or within a joint organization of the Department of Defense and the Office of the Director of the National Intelligence. And that's going to be this I just mentioned it, the Anomaly Surveillance and Resolution Office.
No.
Is what it's going to be called.
Do you expect the powers that be who are not in favor of all this to be able to put the brakes on this, to get it diverted or eliminated, or do you think that they're actually going to get something through?
That remains to be seen, Larry, because you may be aware that there are various techniques and tactics that government agencies use when they oppose a policy directive. There's concept of slow rolling. Mm-hmm. They just take so much time to get anything done that nothing really gets done. Maybe there's going to be backdoor intrigues of Defense Department people pulling senators and congressmen aside and explaining why this is impractical or it's not desirable, and maybe changing some minds. Another thing that can happen is the administration can change. Biden could lose the election, and another president that could come in who is not as amenable to all this as the present administration. And other priorities may arise in which this program may not get the funding that it needs to really truly be effective. So there are a lot of things that could go wrong.
And if they go right, we're going to just wrapping it up now. If things go right, you say it's a giant step forward, and what can we expect from that?
Well, we can expect semi-annual and annual reports to the Congress. Some of it is going to be unclassified. So I would hope that we're going to be getting more information than we got out of this June 26 report. And we can expect that. If it's entirely possible that more Congress people are going to be read into the classified part of this, and maybe there's going to be more and more congressional support for even deeper involvement in investigating the UFO phenomenon. That's something that we can hope for. Now, another encouraging sign, I read an article yesterday, excuse me, where the author was claiming that certain investigative journalists are getting involved in digging into this UFO question. And this is something that I hope would occur after the article in the New York Times in December of 2017, and after these events that we've seen of the Congress requesting reports and getting a report. So let's hope that some serious investigative journalists with a lot of stature and a lot of credibility are digging into this. And if they do, they're going to find out some very interesting things, I can assure you.
Well, on that hopeful note, we'll wrap up our latest conversation on UFOs. And hopefully things will turn out in a positive aspect. Tom Whitmore of the MUFON, the Mutual UFO Reporting Network, longtime member, very dedicated to the research involved in that. You've made it your life's work. Thanks once again for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Larry. Thank you very much.